And welcome everybody. So today we are here with a Clear Admit and Lauder Institute joint session to talk about the Lauder Wharton joint MA MBA program. And so my name is Mike. I'm with the Clear Admit team. Clear Admit's a fantastic website where you can go to get a lot of tips and tricks and advice to get yourselves through the MBA application process. For programs like the Wharton MBA, like the Lauder Wharton joint program, as well as many other MBA programs that are out there. So if you're looking for help on your essays or how to put your resume together or interview guides or anything like that, definitely join us on our site. That is the most I'll talk about us for now, because today's session is going to be all about the Lauder Wharton joint program. And we have some fantastic panelists who are here today to talk about their experience either in the program or when they were in the program, because we do have a recent alum among us as well. And so with that, I want to take the time to go around the table here and introduce each panelist. Right before I do that, I do want to just mention this session is being recorded, as you may have just heard. So feel free to hang out during the session. If you are an attendee, you'll be able to watch this video later on today when we make it live. So that is taken care of. And if you do have questions, we have some prepped questions for the panel that we got through the registration today. But if there's other questions that you have thought of after you registered that you want to ask the panel, type it into the Q&A box or into the chat. We'll try to get to as many as we can as we get through the next hour. So with that, I will kick it around the table here and we'll start just going in the order on my screen. So Alexander, we'll start with you. Tell us about yourself a little bit, where you are in the program and what you're up to right now.
Sure. My name is Alexander Robinson. I am a rising second year in the Lauder program. I am concentrating in Latin America, specifically Portuguese, so Brazil, essentially. I'd spent a year there between high school and college, learned the language, loved the culture, and decided that I wanted to revisit that part of the world for my master's program alongside my MBA. And I'm joining from Los Angeles, where I am doing a brand management marketing internship at Neutrogena.
Very, very, very nice. Thank you. Moving on to Hannah.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. I'm Hannah. I am on the global track, rising second year as well. I am originally from Vietnam, but I went to school in Singapore and lived there for a long time. And before Wharton, I was in San Francisco working at Google from Singapore to San Francisco. Right now, I am at Amazon doing product management internship. And so excited to answer your questions.
Very, very nice. All right, awesome stuff. And Daniel, how about yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Daniel Miao. I was born in the US, did a little bit of time in China as a young kid, and then did my education in the US. Prior to Wharton Lauder, I spent 6 years as a soybean trader, living in the US, Switzerland, and China. Last summer, I interned for British Petroleum BP, and I just graduated about a month ago now. Pleasure to meet everybody.
Very nice, and congratulations on graduating from the program. Obviously a huge accomplishment, very good stuff. And last but not least, Kara, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Kara Keenan-Sweeney. I'm the Director of Admissions Marketing and Financial Aid at the Lauder Institute. So please feel free to come to me with all your admissions questions after the session. Thanks so much for joining us and looking forward to the panel.
Awesome stuff. So as you can see, pretty well covered from all different areas of industry, right? So we have some brand management, we have some folks from petroleum, energy, oil, as well as tech, and then we have some missions representatives. So all your questions can be answered today. The first thing I want to start with, and this may be further back for some of you, specifically Daniel, than for others, but think about the time when you were ready to apply to schools. What about Lauder stuck out to you that made you apply to this program specifically? And we'll start with Alex, sorry, Alexander.
Sure, thanks. So I remember I attended the Reaching Out MBA conference for pre-MBAs, which is a queer recruiting conference for MBAs that I'm going to this fall now as a student, helping lead the delegation from Wharton. So there's a fun full circle effect there. But I remember when I attended, my top priority was a program, a global MBA program, a program that had a global focus. And so I just went around to every single school and asked, I'm really interested in a global MBA. What global opportunities does your program offer? And I remember I stopped at the Wharton booth and there were 3 Lauder students there representing the program. And they said, look, there's no better integrated global MBA program than the Lauder Institute. And from then on, I was really kind of sold because I was really between going to business school in Europe because I knew that I would get an international experience that way and staying here in the US. And the Wharton Lauder MBA program is really the only fully integrated global MBA program in the US. And so it was a no-brainer for me once I heard that.
Sounds great. And up next, we'll have Hannah. Anything to add? Anything from your experience?
Yeah, for sure. So for me, I have a pretty international background and I've lived in a few places before, and I really enjoy the diverse experience from living in other places and exchanging ideas and cultures with other people. And I didn't know about the Lauder program until I met some alumni, and they are honestly the best representation of the program. And they told me so much about it. I guess we'll go through it today, but the immersion, the LIV, and all these things just really speak to me. And I thought it was basically my top choice program from the start, and very excited that I was able to join.
So Hannah, it sounds like almost like sessions like this, right, where you're able to meet some folks during the process, kind of help steer you in that right direction.
Yeah.
There you go. Perfect. And then Daniel, how about for you? I know it's a little further back, so hopefully this is okay to ask this question.
Oh, absolutely. To be very honest, I did not know about Lauder until about 5 days before the application deadline, where I was researching Wharton, reached out to an alum who happened to actually be in the same office as me. Turns out she was a Lauder alum. The next day I had brunch with her and her husband, who is also a Lauder alum. And within the space of about 2 hours, they completely and utterly sold me on Lauder. For me, it was 2 things. One, it was the immersion, the LIVs, the travel, and the global experience. And then secondly, it was the sense of community. The way they talk about the community, and I think you'll hear about it from all of us, was something that was just utterly integral, and something that, for me, coming from a very small undergrad, very small, very integrated community, was something I wanted replicated during my MBA experience. And that was probably the #1 seller for me.
That's great to hear. And Daniel, to stick with you for a second there, because you mentioned the community and the fact that you have kind of this smaller group, right, that you can work with and study with and do all of the things that Lauder offers with, right? So how is that balance of like being within this Lauder community that has a large reach? It's a little bit of a smaller group within the larger Wharton community. Like, talk about how all that interacts and that experience for you.
Sure. I would definitely say that during my 2 years, without the Lauder community, I don't know if I would have had as amazing an experience as I did. Especially in the first year, it was entirely virtual for us. Despite that, I only made it into Philadelphia maybe a handful of times, but every single time it was to visit other people, it was to have dinner with other people, to get drinks with other people. Now, I think it's up to everybody what you want in terms of experience. It is very easy to kind of just be folded into this community of 80 people, 90 people, and to then generally maybe not partake as much in the larger Wharton community, but it's entirely up to you, and you can completely balance it. I know for myself, I chose to be integrated more into the Lauder community, and I chose to host a lot more dinners with Lauder people. But I also hosted probably 5 or 6 dinners with the larger Wharton community as well during my 2 years. So it's kind of up to each one of us to determine.
It's awesome. And I saw Hannah and Alexander both kind of nodding along there. So anything either one would want to add to that about the community? Hannah, yeah.
Yeah, definitely 100%. I think the community is the best thing for Lauder for sure. I would say I consider it a home base because Wharton is a very big school, has 900 people, and our program is 70, 80. So I know we started earlier as well, so we are very close compared to the rest of Wharton. And yeah, you can branch out, but I feel like my home base and my comfort space is definitely a lot of folks.
Yeah, I would echo what Hannah and Daniel said. The only thing I'd add is we have our own dedicated building on campus as well, which definitely gives it more, as Hannah said, that home-based feel. Just knowing that you can walk into the Lauder building and have lunch with friends or run into faculty or staff, it definitely feels like the locus of my community on campus. And I definitely don't take that for granted.
That's great. No, I mean, being able to call the school home, I think is fantastic. I mean, that's what you want, right? You want to feel comfortable. You want to feel like it's a place you can be safe. You can have friends and family, I guess, at that point, right, that are studying along with you. So, but with that, right, so, and you've all mentioned now as well, there is that larger Wharton community that does exist that's not in your building, but around the building and on a pretty big campus of University of Pennsylvania. So what are some of the key benefits of doing this Lauder program along with Wharton as compared to maybe just people going through the Wharton MBA without the Lauder experience? Would anybody have anything to comment there? We can start with maybe Hannah.
Okay, so I think, like as we mentioned earlier, the community is definitely the most important thing to me, but also I've always interested in international studies. And one thing that you probably would touch on later as well is the travel and the classes that we take at Lauder as well. So maybe we'll have specific questions on this, but we have this thing called Lauder International Venture. And so in March, a bunch of us went, and Daniel and I were on the same trip to Senegal, and we learned about Sufi Muslim on peacekeeping in Senegal. And it is something that is so special. And like, I don't think you can get it from anywhere else. And so I thought that is, and it's also only with Lauder people, and the classes were invested. It was 10-day, just us, and we have very, very in-depth conversations and learning from about the topic. And I thought that was a very special thing for Lauder.
It's great. Alexander, anything to add on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would echo Hannah again. I mean, it's a whole second degree, right? So you're getting a master's in international studies alongside a master's in business administration. And with that comes a ton of extra coursework that is really rewarding if that's your area of interest. For me, the thing that was really pulling me towards Lauder was the emphasis on language. So I've always been a bit of a polyglot, a linguophile. I really love learning languages because, especially as a window into new cultures, and I love the fact that twice a week I get to spend an hour and a half, 2 hours with a class of 3 people with a dedicated language faculty, really helping me improve my language ability. So on the academic side, that's what I'm getting from the program is the international studies component, but also the language study that really differentiates it from the typical Wharton curriculum. And then I'd echo Hannah again with, we've touched on the community, and then the travel is amazing. I mean, we not only have the Lauder Intercultural Ventures, as Hannah mentioned, but we also have a lot of student organized travel that happens around the edges of our program. And that ranges from just casual trips that we take amongst our cohort to various places around the world, to more structured cohort-wide programming. For instance, in January, many of us, I think over 100 of us, traveled to Egypt for what was called Culture Quest. And it's basically an amazing race-style, student-organized trip where we all split into teams of like 5, 7, 8 people, and we're competing against one another to gain culture points by participating in local activities. So, I mean, there's no comparing, I think, the sort of social and community elements that I get from Lauder with anything else, whether it be, just at Wharton or at other schools. So I'm really, really grateful for all of those extra opportunities that I get alongside my MBA.
Love the Amazing Race show. So that's awesome. And Alexander, how many languages do you know? I'm the typical American who barely knows English. So how many languages do you know?
So just a little bit of background. I grew up in South Africa and Kenya before going to Brazil and then coming back to the US for college. So I speak German and Portuguese because I was a German major in college and learned Portuguese in Brazil. And then I studied Swahili and Spanish in high school. So I wouldn't say I'm by any means fluent in Swahili or Spanish, but they are languages that I'm familiar with and would like to continue to improve.
Very good, very good. Daniel, anything to add about the Wharton versus Wharton Lauder, I guess, combined, any other things from your perspective on that topic?
I absolutely agree with Alexander and Hannah on everything they said. The other thing I'll add is, as I think about the classes that I've taken during my 2 years, that really changed my perspective and shifted my paradigms. It has definitely been the specific class within Lauder for the global program, taught by Regina Abrami. And it's basically this class that you take with only the globals, which for my class was 11 of us. So all 4 terms, all 4 semesters. So you really got to know each other extremely well. And we're looking at topics ranging from inequality, ranging from gender issues, ranging from politics, ranging from power, and really studying and really diving deep into these topics with a group of people that A, you're extremely, extremely close with, and B, not afraid to voice their true opinions. I cannot express just how much I learned from both Regina, the professor, as well as all my classmates during that class. And I definitely believe that coming out of Lauder specifically, my paradigm has shifted on a lot of these topics, and I approach a lot of issues very differently than I did before the MBA. I really don't know if that would have happened without the Lauder program.
It's really interesting stuff, all the different perspectives that you all have. Kara, is there anything that you would add to that particular topic on, Lauder versus Wharton specifically?
Well, maybe I'll just take the opportunity to speak to, I think sometimes a common misconception from applicants. I think often folks are afraid that by applying to Wharton and Lauder, it's that much harder to get in. So I think sometimes there's a perception of having to first get into Wharton, then get into Lauder. Wharton is always super competitive in and of itself. But the nice thing with applying to a joint degree like Lauder is you're applying amongst a small pool of applicants who have only applied to Wharton and Lauder jointly. So it's a joint application to a joint program where you receive a joint offer of admission. So the programs are fully integrated from the application stage all the way through, until our students graduate from the program. And also the Lauder admissions team takes the lead with the review of applications. So it's a really high touch process. We really shape the class, shape the community. We have 10 languages taught at Lauder, plus our global program, plus our Africa program. So I think it's just to sort of dissuade any misconceptions that applying to Lauder makes it that much more competitive. It's really a self-selected applicant pool, and really putting together kind of a special community of students out of that very highly self-selected pool.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's great to hear that process because, plenty of misconceptions about not just at Wharton, but a lot of schools with how the admissions process works. So thanks for helping clear that part up. So now we can get into more of like the experience in the program, right? So this is all more of like, what was great about it? What's the community? But let's talk about like, the day in and day out, the curriculum type stuff. Hannah, you mentioned some of like the ventures and the trip that you went on. So maybe we could kind of knock out a couple of those types of questions as well. Because I know we had some of those in the registration process of these different kind of smaller pieces of, not small, I won't say, but like different aspects of the curriculum that really do set Lauder apart that I want to make sure we touch on. So generally, right, talk about the experience in the program, right? And we'll start with Daniel since you've gone through the whole program, but how do you balance like time versus extracurricular types of stuff versus finishing all the academics and then all the other things like the trips and the knowledge labs and all of this stuff. You graduated, you made it through. So you're going to be our best person to talk us through this topic.
I think that during any MBA, it's up to each person to kind of determine what's their priority. And there are a lot of competing priorities: getting that internship, doing full-time recruiting, the academics, the travel, the party, sleeping, maybe. But I think it's up to you to kind of determine what is your priority at the time. And I don't think that anybody can do everything all at the same time. And so you do kind of have to prioritize. For me, sometimes I prioritize simply recruiting plus the academics and the travel, and didn't party as much. There were other times when that was completely flipped. For me, though, I don't really think that academically it was incredibly challenging. Yes, Lauder, you do have extra classes. There is more work. But frankly, you're in classes for 4 days a week, maybe 2 if you schedule your schedule correctly. You have a lot of free time. Every Friday you have off, just period. So you can definitely find the time to do a lot of things. And I think it's a clear mark of excellence that Lauder is extremely well represented on all the club boards. And I actually struggle to think of many clubs without at least 1 or 2 Lauder members as on their membership, on their board. So I think it's fairly easy to balance, and you just kind of need to prioritize what is important to you at any given point in time.
Makes sense. Hannah, Alexander, in your first year, how's it been? How has the adjustment been back to going to school and moving forward? Alexander, we can start with you there.
Yeah, I'd say it was definitely an adjustment, especially coming out of, and I know, Hannah, you're in the same boat, coming out of COVID, right? I mean, because we were launched into this post-COVID world of social interaction and being back in the classroom, even with masks on. And so it was a real 180 from like me quarantining in my parents' basement for COVID. Very, very different experience. But I will say, to Daniel's point, that there are really 3 things that got me through my first year. I would say 1, on the front end, the program works super closely with Wharton administration to make sure that it is as integrated and seamlessly integrated as possible. So they're extremely efficient in, for instance, counting dual credits between the Lauder program and the Wharton MBA. As Hannah was saying, these LIVs that we do over certain breaks count as course credits towards our degree. So we're both traveling and learning while also working towards our degree. And so in the 3 months before we even start Wharton are dedicated purely to Lauder coursework so that we're able to graduate coterminously with our Wharton class. So the first point I would say is integration. The second, I would say there are so many dedicated resources beyond our building that help support students through the first year. And a lot of things weighing on my mind in the fall, it was career recruiting. And we have our own dedicated career staff just for Lauder students who is so helpful in helping us navigate career recruiting in the fall so that we're able to do that alongside the dual degree coursework, alongside being involved in clubs. And so they've really thoughtfully, I think, articulated kind of when and where this support should happen so that you are able to deal with it as it comes and sort of trust the process. And then the third piece, not to harp on the community element, but you're really not alone. I mean, as a first year, I relied so heavily on second years like Daniel and their institutional knowledge of the program whenever I'd have a question, not just about Lauder, but Wharton more broadly, whether it's which club I should join, how can I get involved, how can I balance my time? I would always feel like I had 80 second years to rely on. And that's something that I think, again, is fairly unique to Lauder, having those second years to rely on when it can often be intimidating as a first year stepping foot on campus, not knowing anyone.
Hannah, how about for you, that balance? How has that been for you?
Yeah, I echo everything that they said. For me as well, when I came in, so I talked to a lot of alum before joining, and before I joined, I have a specific ideas of what is important in terms of, I think the one thing that you really need to consider is which clubs you're interested in, because when you come in, there's so many clubs and you probably won't be able to have time to join everything. So I think be deliberate about that and see what's important to you. Like, for example, for me, I really wanted to do boxing club, and that is one of the very few clubs that I joined, and I really enjoyed it. And Daniel was in it as well. He's a big fighter.
It's boxing. You said boxing, right?
Yeah.
All right, so we're not fighting Hannah at the end of this. Got it. Okay.
Daniel is a more expert fighter, but be very deliberate about what you want to get out of it, so you don't feel overwhelmed. But I totally echo what Alexander said. I feel like it is the busiest period of my life, even though I was working full time and was volunteering and doing everything. But it's just like you will get pulled from so many directions. So it's good to have a perspective and have your own journal or like what you want to get out of it.
Yeah, and that might be an interesting thing too. So journaling and some of that, right? So what do you do to kind of like detach sometimes, right? So boxing club, like, are there other things that you've done? Philadelphia is a city there's a lot going on all the time. So do you have those moments to kind of like experience things outside the program as well? And does the city of Philadelphia offer anything to you that you would say to students who've never been there before or don't know much about it? Alexander, I guess maybe we can.
Yeah, I would say I've really loved Philadelphia, especially from a sort of queer community perspective. I've been so impressed by the diversity of representation in the city. I was most immediately coming from Atlanta and DC, and sort of comparing those queer communities to the ones I found in Philly. I found Philly to be very accepting, very welcoming, very representative of the full spectrum of the queer community. And I've really felt at home in the city and also on campus, exploring different events that are happening, different like queer-owned restaurants are very prominent and visible in the city. And there's a whole, it's called the Gayborhood. It's the official designation of an area just east of where most students live in Rittenhouse. And I frequent that area just to, hang out with friends, to go grab a bite to eat, to grab a drink, to go out. And that's been a really, I would say, core part of my experience going outside of campus and getting to know Philadelphia. But in general, it's a very diverse, vibrant, dynamic city where I think a lot of different communities are represented, international communities, immigrant communities, all different kinds of racial and cultural backgrounds are really easily accessible in Philadelphia. So I think it's a great home for the program for like Lauder, which draws so many people from all over the world because there's great food from everywhere. There are great communities from everywhere. It's just a matter of, doing a little bit of digging to find somewhere that you fit in.
Yeah, I can echo that. Is a very fun area of Philadelphia. The few pretty big area too. The area that you mentioned there, and I think someone in the chat actually knows one of the bars down there. So, Daniel, anything you would add about maybe just the city, the surrounding area around campus? Yeah.
Sure. So one of the things that I really, really liked during my 2 years was running along the Schuylkill Trail. So when you're living in Rittenhouse, you are 5 minutes walk away from the river. And basically, I just love running up and down that trail. It goes all the way up into Fairmount Park. You can go probably 10, 15 plus miles one way if you want to. I never made it that far, sorry. But for me, that was just a really nice way to get away from the city. And immediately within a mile, you're out kind of just along the river, in the woods, in the park. And it doesn't feel like you're in the city at all. And for me, that was just a really nice kind of escape from the hustle and the bustle of the city.
Yeah, plus along that school, you have Boathouse Row, and sometimes you'll catch a regatta over there. When the road's closed, there's way more areas to run, so that's always fun too. Hannah, anything else you'll add for the region?
Yeah, I love the outdoor as well. So there's a lot of state parks around, and one of my favorites is Wasahikan. I don't know if I pronounce it correctly, but it's just right north of the Schuylkill. So many terms, but it's like
Nobody pronounces any of them
beautiful.
correctly, so you're fine. None of the
Yeah.
words, yeah. No.
Yeah, it's a beautiful state park. It feels super far away from the city. It's actually just like 20 minutes by Uber. And also in the summer or like in the spring, you can do picnic by by Fairmount Park as well. And it's really, really nice just to get outside.
All right
And
stuff.
then just
Yeah.
one other small thing I'd add is if you did even want to get outside Philly, what I love about Philly, having worked in DC and New York, is it's equidistant between the two. And it's like an hour and a half, 2 hours on Amtrak to either city. So I've got friends in both of them, and I'm easily able to pop up on the weekends, given we don't have class on Fridays. I can head up Thursday evening. I can come back on Sunday if I do decide that I want to get out of the city for a weekend.
Great point. And for those of you who did not flock to the West Coast, you're also only like an hour from the Jersey Shore. So there's a lot of, yeah, not too bad. You passed my house. So even further outside of the city, right, Lauder offers the Lauder Intercultural Venture Experiences, which Hannah, you kind of touched on a little bit. Alexander, you touched on before. Talk more about that. Like, how do you get on their trips? How do you get to pick where to go? All this different stuff. And Hannah, maybe you can kind of finish up more about your Senegal trip. Like, talk us through the experience of being able to do that trip, what you did there, and why it was important.
Yeah, so as part of the program, we have 2 compulsory LIVs, and we did our first one last year. So Lauder will give us choices of a few places. So for this year, we had Senegal, India, Israel, and Poland and Hungary. And so we will look at the place, we look at the topic, and we'll write essays about our first and second choice. And then the Lauder administration will read through the essays and then put us into these. So everyone will get a chance to go. You may not get your first choice, but everyone get a chance to go to one of these amazing places. And yeah, it's just see which topic appeals the most to you and apply.
Dana, you were on that same trip, did you say earlier? Or yeah, do you want to touch on that as well?
Yeah, I was on the same trip with Hannah. The other one I went on was Iceland. And for the Senegal one, I thought that was absolutely amazing. It was led by actually one of the faculty who teaches at Lauder as well. And we met so many top leaders of the Sufi order in Senegal. No, I'm going to butcher the name, so never mind. But we met with so many of the religious leaders. We visited so many of these mosques. And it was an absolutely amazing experience, basically to see behind the scenes within Senegal, just the true trappings of power, and could see and really understand how business, politics, and religion all completely intersect at these religious centers, and how just power and the dynamics are really formed. And it was behind and really, really insightful look behind the scenes. Iceland was also amazing. That one, but was more of it was the first one LIV that was done. And sorry, it was the second LIV done, but it was basically the first time that my entire class got to travel together. So it was similarly just an amazing experience.
Alexander, where did you get to go?
Yeah, so just a quick shout out to the other trips. So Hannah and Daniel mentioned Senegal, Iceland. There were also other trips to Peru, to India, to Hungary and Poland. And then I had the pleasure of going to Israel, Palestine in March. It was my first time in the region. It was a phenomenal trip. I enjoyed it so much, actually, that I went back in May to visit the West Bank and the border with Gaza. But it was really incredible. We spent time in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and Haifa, exploring the sort of socio-political and socio-cultural valences of food, and how, you know, Israeli cuisine has been structured over time in contrast to and in conversation with other Middle Eastern cuisines. And that's just been definitely the highlight of my first year. As someone who'd already been to like 40 plus countries before coming to Lauder and having lived in many others, I didn't expect to continue to grow and learn at the pace that I have in the program. I kind of expected to deepen knowledge of areas I'd already been. But the LIVs are a great way to continue to visit new countries, new places, new cultures, new geographies. And you know, there's just so much more that you can learn. And it's one of those things where the more you travel, especially with Lauder, the more you realize that you don't know, which is part of the reason I decided to revisit in May and do a bit more digging. So it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And as Hannah mentioned, you have the opportunity to do minimum 2, but up to, you know, 3 or 4 during your time in Lauder.
Yeah, that's great. And now, so like you do these trips, right? And you're meeting people, and as Daniel mentioned, you're seeing like a totally different form of government and the way that like a country's run totally differently. Does that then, when you get back home, right, does that give you a different perspective when working with different people, just to kind of think a little differently, right? Because you've seen something completely different from what you're used to. And then when you have those people that you are used to, it's like now you might recognize different things in them as well, just because of now you've experienced you know, something that you never thought was out there. So I'm seeing it nodding head. So I kind of, all right, I'm hitting on something there. Okay, great. So, and we do have some questions coming to the chat. We will get to these as well. I have one other one about some of the Lauder experience, and then I'm going to get to some career questions as well. And so if there's any more questions coming in, feel free to type them in and we'll make sure we get to them. We have some time left. So the other kind of, you know, everything's a global experience at Lauder, but another big global experience, the Global Knowledge Lab. So talk through that, and we can start with Alexander. What is that? What is the GKL? Where do you do it? When do you do it? Give us kind of the little story here.
So the GKL is essentially your thesis for the Masters of International Studies. So UPenn requires that any master's program write a thesis. And so again, I mentioned that integration and streamlining piece that Lauder Admin does with Wharton. I think they do a great job of integrating our thesis into our program. It currently, as it stands, has two components. There's the individual GKL, and then there's the team GKL. The team GKL tends to involve travel to international countries. It's explicitly across different programs of concentration, so you're encouraged to think globally. And then the individual GKL is a deep dive into a topic within your program of concentration. So I'm focusing for my individual GKL on the history of sexuality in like the early modern period in Brazil, and kind of how different legal categories were defined by the Portuguese colonial powers during the time. And then for my group project, I'm working with students across the Africa program, both English and French tracks, as well as the Spanish language program, and the India South Asia program, to basically analyze colonial development along the eastern coast of Kenya and Western India. So really, really varied topics, and we're assigned advisors from within Lauder and then also at UPenn more broadly to help us craft those topics. And in terms of when it starts, like you really hit the ground running as soon as you start Lauder. The program really doesn't waste any time in forming those teams, choosing a topic, assigning advisors. Given the demands of the program, it can be a lot to dedicate extra mental space to a thesis when you're busy pursuing a dual degree in career and clubs. So they definitely take a proactive approach, and you start thinking about it literally as soon as you start the program, if not before, during your admissions essays.
I mean, that's a pretty solid summary. Hannah, Daniel, is there anything to add there? Anything that you have different? Hannah, go ahead.
Yeah, so Daniel and I are in the global program, so our GKL is slightly different. So for the other concentration, they focus on their region, but for us, we have to do a comparative, so cross-region thing of global phenomenon. So for my individual one, I'm doing education technology between Vietnam and Egypt. And then for our GKL, we're doing marine conservation in Indonesia and Ecuador. So we get to do a lot of comparisons across the world, which is pretty cool.
Very, very good stuff. Awesome. All right. So, Daniel, anything else there? You look like you're about, no, okay, good, perfect. So actually, I'll start with you in this next question, because now we're getting into kind of the career support, right? So there's the process of, while you're in school, all the recruiting activities, all the different interviews, all the preparation, all the resume guides and prep and crafting, right? So give us the story here. What's the experience as a Lauder Wharton student? How much does Lauder help? How much do you get access to the Wharton community to help? And what was your experience through now, post program?
So I know I keep coming back to community, but honestly, that was the most defining thing about the Lauder experience, and that applies very much to recruiting as well. I know somebody asked in the chat about, do you get access to more opportunities? The short answer is yes, you do. The community extends far beyond the 2 years that you'll spend in Philadelphia. When recruiting comes, you get more access to opportunities. Whenever a job opening at any of the alums companies comes up, especially at startups, first thing they'll do is email the Lauder career advisor and say, hey, there's this opening, anybody want it? Please apply. During recruiting, I remember one specific example. I won't name the fund, but basically this person, this fund manager, any Wharton student that applies and gets the interview will have lunch or dinner with this person. Any Lauder student that has the interview will stay at this fund manager's house the night before. And so that kind of just gives you a sense of how strong that community is. And it's kind of just the extra touch that you do get during the recruiting process. For myself, when I was recruiting, did a lot more kind of just personal. It wasn't so much the resume drops standard for most. So it's kind of just more emailing people. I would say that any Lauder alum I emailed, I got a response within 2 days, 80% of the time, 90% of the time. With Wharton, it was still pretty good. I got 30% of the time a response. With just cold emails, I got a response 5%, 10%. And so ultimately, it's just that community really, really matters.
Alexander, we'll move over to you because you're in an internship right now, right? So you may have some perspective on how that process went. You can maybe add on.
Yeah, for sure. I would, definitely say that for any sort of international position, it's very easy to leverage the Lauder degree to position yourself as a really strong candidate for that job. Just mentioning the program, mentioning that you have this interest, having a second master's, really doing intense language and regional work is a real asset. I'm not even placed globally, but I happen to be at a global firm. And that was something that I talked about a lot during my interview process. And it was a big priority for me in choosing which company to intern at. Was I wanted a company that would potentially, if I choose to stay there, 3, 4, 5 years down the line, take me abroad. And so I had those conversations from my first interview saying, part of the reason why I'm interested in Neutrogena, in J&J, is it's a global firm. They have a global outlook. I have a global interest. I'd like to do a rotation abroad. Similar to, that Romba conversation I had with business schools, like, tell me about your program, what global opportunities are there? I had that same conversation with companies. Tell me about your company, what global opportunities are there? And that's something that I think just having the Lauder degree and community as an added touch point can just make a really compelling narrative for employers when they're looking out for people who are interested in global work and global careers.
Hannah, anything you would like to add? Anything from your experience thus far?
Yeah, I actually want to call out something that's really cool that I'm helping to organize. I think Alexander is in it as well. We have a, I think Lauder Global Alumni Weekend. I'm not sure how often that is before COVID, but basically it's an event that a lot of alumni come. And this year it's in person in New York in October. And you will see a lot of Lauder alumni that come to this event, even though they have graduated since like the 90s. And I'm helping to organize the conference. And when you reach out to these people, they are so happy to come back and join. And it's just so refreshing to see the very, very high response rate, like what Daniel said. And during my recruitment, because I was trying to see if I want to do an ed tech internship for the summer. And so Kim, the Lauder career person, a big shout out to her. She's just a rock star, and she just gives you like a list of all the alumni working in these places, and you can just reach out to them, and super, super helpful. I think that is a very big plus compared to Wharton only.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with like a more tight-knit program, right? Is that you make those connections throughout the program, and then they want to stay connected because they had that experience. So that pay it forward of alumni, I don't think it could be understated. Like there's just so much overstated, whatever way makes it like it's amazing, right? So Kara, anything else you want to add for this section here on career? Or I see you dropped the link in the chat, which is super helpful. So folks that are attending, definitely, save that link, go read through everything that's available for career. It's one of the major decision points for MBA applicants at large, but obviously for a dual degree program as well. Anything you want to add there?
The only thing I would mention is if folks are interested, you can actually go to the website lauderlove.com, which is actually one of the hashtags our students and our alums really use is lauderlove, hashtag lauderlove. And it's a website run by our alums where there's a lot of information on sort of the activities that are available to alumni, just to get an idea of sort of what life is like post Lauder. Our alums are very connected to the community, and Hannah mentioned our reunion coming up in the fall. So lots of ways to stay connected, whether it's through career search or long-term, with the community.
Great. And I already went to this site and I'm going to have to check it all out now. Now I'm going to be interested. So let's see. Are there any other questions from the audience? We've, I think, gone through all the main questions that we had submitted to us prior to the session. But I want to make sure if there's any other last questions, we can make sure we answer that. One other one I know that we do want to get to, which I was going to end on, but we could do right now anyway, is if you had I can add on two actually. So a lot of the folks attending today, they're prospective applicants, right? So they're still considering, is this going to be the program for them? Now that you're either in the program or have now gone through it in Daniel's case, what's something that you wish you knew about this whole process at the stage that these folks are at now, right? Now that you're in the program or you've gone through the program, what's one piece of advice you'd love to give these folks? Make sure this is either part of your process or make sure you consider this certain thing. What's that juicy tidbit? You could start that pay it forward mentality of Lauder today. Daniel, looks like you might be the closest to an answer here. So I'm going to have to call on you, I think.
Well, I mean, at this stage in my process, I didn't even know about Lauder. So congrats to everybody on the call. You know a lot more than I do.
Great point.
I guess the other thing I would just say is talk to the alumni or talk to students in the program. Generally speaking, they're more than happy to talk to you. And through that, you'll get a very strong sense of what Lauder is about and if it's the right fit for you. Talking to prospective students during my 2 years, you also get a very strong sense very quickly of, does this match? And when it matches, it really, really matches.
Alexander, Hannah, anything a year ago at this time?
Yeah, I kind of referenced it earlier with the LIV and the culture quest, but I kind of wish that I knew or at least expected just how much my mind would be opened to new possibilities. I think especially in admissions, people can kind of go down the rabbit hole of being like, I need to tell admissions, exactly what I'm recruiting for, what I want to be doing, exactly the industry and the position. And I would say that I wish that I had, at least in the admissions process, a little bit more of an open mind around what my priorities were actually going to be. Once I arrived on campus, there's just so much that you learn so quickly, so many industries that you're exposed to that you never knew existed, so many people, so many career paths. The more that you talk to alums, especially, there's just so much available to you during these 2 years. And it's really just the floodgates open in terms of opportunity. So I think the one piece of advice is I would say definitely still be hard-nosed about your priorities, but don't let those blinders come up to other things that you hadn't considered along the way. I didn't think that I would be where I'm at right now, but I'm so happy that I am and that I made that decision. So definitely just keep an open mind and allow the program to shape you, because that's how it's intended.
And Kara, do you have any follow-up on that, right? As someone who's reading these files, for people that are coming into the program saying, this is what I'm going to do, give us a ballpark. What's the amount of people who change their mind even in the first semester? Too many, right?
I don't know, maybe 90%, something like that. Yeah, don't at all feel bound to anything you say in your essay. We're not going to hold you, whether on the Wharton side, the Lauder Committee actually reads your Wharton essays. We certainly want to hear what you're thinking about short-term, long-term, goals, objectives, all that good stuff. But no, I think that's one of the great things about business school is you're in a position to be turned on to all kinds of new ideas, opportunities, maybe even, an entrepreneurial venture, so the world is kind of your oyster during those 2 years. So no, don't at all feel beholden, to what you're thinking now and how it may change in the future.
And Daniel, you can vouch for this. At graduation, right? Did they have your essay on stage and check it to make sure you're doing? Yeah, that's what they do, right? They make sure everything you wrote has to match or you can't graduate. Yeah. I think that's such a huge piece of advice, Alexander. Thanks for bringing that piece up of MBA essays. They have a point. There's a reason for them, but it's not locked in, it's not glued. You know, there's a lot of growth in MBA programs, especially one like Lauder, that's a joint program that has a lot going on, that experiences and travel and all this different stuff. So keep that in mind. That's a good piece of advice for applicants at this point, is to, you know, really let that growth happen, right? Don't be closed off to that. Don't have blinders on, like be open to the growth. That's why you do these types of programs. Really good piece of advice. Hannah, anything else to add, piece of advice or something that you would wish you had known?
Yeah, I think I totally agree with Alexander in terms of like just thinking about it. The process of thinking about something and why you're doing it helps you a lot, but don't be too stressed out. I think at the beginning, I didn't believe this, but everybody said everything will be fine at the end. Don't worry, you'll find something. And of course, everyone is still very stressed out, but we all ended up being fine, enjoying our summer internship, and I guess for Daniel's jobs. So everything will be fine. If you're still considering Lauder, just apply, you won't regret.
I love it. There you go. Right. There's only been thousands of people who've done it prior. So it works out, right? It wouldn't still be an option for folks if it didn't work out for most, if not all. So I don't really see any other questions. We've been answering questions in the chat as we go. So I guess my last question here for this group, and we do have people asking for contact information. So for the panelists here, you know, if you do wish to share that in the chat, I know we have talked a lot about reaching out to alums or current students, so you may have to share your info now. I'm sorry, but I think you kind of you set yourselves up for that. So feel free to do that, and attendees can feel free to reach out. Last question, it could be a one-word answer, it could be like a quick answer, but the best thing about Lauder at this point in your program, or for Daniel, you know, throughout the program that you've done, what's like the number one best thing about this program in your perspective? And Alexander, we'll start with you, I guess.
I know somebody else is going to say community, so I'll say adventure.
Adventure. There you go. Okay. Hannah, community is open. I don't know. You can steal it now.
Definitely the people.
The people. Good, good, good. And Daniel, 2 years worth. What's the best thing?
I guess I have to answer community now.
Somebody has to. And Kara, somebody who's seen, you know, enough students go through the program here, what do you think is the best thing? What's the number one reason that students tell you that they pick the program or enjoy the program or anything like that?
I think it's just the opportunity to broaden your horizons, you know, literally, metaphorically, the opportunity to learn and grow. As Alexander mentioned, you know, most of our students who come to the program are quite savvy globally by the time they come to Lauder, but I think the program gives you an opportunity to grow, continue to grow in that regard.
Kara, anything else? I'll wrap up with you here before we kind
Yeah.
of sign off. Is there anything else you want to mention to folks about the application process or what they need to be
Sure.
doing next?
Yeah, thank you. So the application for next year's cycle will open in early July. The Lauder application is embedded into the Wharton application online. So if you're thinking about applying to Lauder, you start your Wharton application, you indicate you're also applying to Lauder. For Lauder, we'll ask for an essay, we'll ask for results of a language test. You can find all of that information on our website. I would encourage you at some point to attend maybe another session. Each month I host a webinar where we really go through the admissions presentation. We have drop-in Q&A sessions with our admissions committee if you want to talk one-on-one with an admissions officer. So lots of opportunities to learn more, but application launching soon, and the round one deadline will be in early September. And good luck to everybody, and thank you for attending.
Yeah, and I do want to, I'll echo that same thank you for our attendees for hanging out with us from all over the globe. So some people, you stayed up pretty late or woke up in the middle of the night, either way. So thank you for jumping on for this. To our panelists from also all over the place, most West Coast, I guess. But thank you also for sitting and sharing a lot of really good information. I know I learned a bunch, and I do not need to go to business school right now, but it makes me want to. Or maybe just do Lauder. I don't know. I got to hang out more across the river here because I'm over on the Jersey side. So maybe I got to go sit in on some of these classes. But this was an awesome session. I learned a lot about the joint program. I hope our attendees did as well. So thank you all for joining. And Kara, thank you for bringing the panel together and setting up this event with us, because this was great. Any last words from anybody? No, cool. All right, awesome. So again, thank you all. We'll get this video out so you can watch it and take some great notes. Get ready for those applications, and that deadline will be here sooner rather than later. So do not slack. As soon as it's open, at least log in, get your account started, check out what's going to be due when, and get to work. Hopefully we'll see. We could have about half your class in this session right now. So we'll see. All right. Thanks all again, and we'll see you all in future sessions.